Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk about complicated things and improve over time, just like wine does. This week I'm really excited. We actually have a chef speaking with us, and so I'm going to read her bio before we get into it. But today we have Candice Custodio, and she is a Cal Poly SLO alumni. Chef Candice has been a Los Angeles native, now permanently residing on the Central Coast. She has held various positions as an executive chef, restaurant/menu consultant, private chef, and now has been featured on the Food Network's Chopped. She's currently the chef at Kindred Oak Farm in Paso Robles. And for people that have listened to the podcast from last season, we actually did an episode at Kindred Oak, which I'll link in the bio. But yeah, it's a great company, family that runs the business. And so, yeah, so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. So how do you like being a chef at Kindred Oak?
I think Kindred is such a beautiful place, and I work a lot. I'm working less now, but I work so much. And I always say that Kindred, I'm working, but I find it really relaxing to be there. Like, it's not stressful, and I can kind of just do what I want to do. And I don't think it's a job I would ever leave because it mellows me out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what would the day-to-day look like for you as a chef there, or as like a private chef as well?
Right. So right now, I recently had a baby about 7 months ago. So my schedule right now is a lot different than when it was like a year and a half ago. I really tried to rearrange my schedule so I could be home with my daughter more. So I have I'm at Kindred on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when we have guests to do brunch. So I'm there usually get there around 7 a.m, and then I'm there until around 11. And then I also work at this place called Paso Wine Merchant in Paso. So Tuesday through Saturday, I'm at Paso Wine Merchant. And then certain days where it overlaps with Kindred, I finish Kindred and then go over to Paso Wine Merchant and then do my day there and then come home. And then every now and again, I have private events that are also tossed into the mix. So sometimes I can go from like 7 till probably 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds, even though this sounds like it's a very long day, like we just said, right, it's relaxing, and your work is what you love to do. So I'm sure it's really nice and fulfilling when you get to create a dish and then get to see people's reaction eating it.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's something I enjoy. And, people always ask me like, oh, do you cook at home? Because you're always cooking. And I do cook at home. I just enjoy cooking. So it's just something that I really enjoy. Like right now I have chicken in the oven.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm not sure if you have a beverage, but for people, perfect. So what are you drinking?
So this is a local small tasting room vineyard. It's called Détente, and this is their Grenache Blanc.
Grenache Blanc.
Yeah.
Very nice. So I am drinking the Madalena Rosé, and so from San Antonio Winery.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I actually, fun fact, I used to work at the San Antonio Winery location in Ontario.
Oh.
So that's how I ended up getting introduced to the Paso region first, because we had they have the winery up there, and then I met Tyler, who connected me with you. But so I'm curious to know more. So what made you want to start wanting to, because I remember when we had chatted that your degree originally was in culinary because your parents were trying to wanted you to go a different direction. But what was do you remember how young you were when you first started having an interest for cooking and for food?
I've always enjoyed food, probably a little too much, but I've always enjoyed food. I didn't really start thinking about wanting to be a chef or going to school professionally until probably about 19. I was already at Cal Poly, and I just didn't feel like I was doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't really having a good time at Cal Poly. I mean, I was having a good time, but I wasn't having like a fulfilling time of like, I don't think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was starting to teach myself how to cook. I just didn't want to eat fast food and I didn't want to do all that stuff. So I was teaching myself how to cook and I just really enjoyed it. And I had spoken to my mom when I was home from break and I told her, I kind of want to go to culinary school. And she said, no. So, you have to finish college first and then do whatever you want. So it kind of just became a personal hobby for a long time. I didn't really consider doing it professionally again until probably I was like 28 or 29.
Mm.
And then I got laid off from the job that I had. And then my husband kind of just said, if you're waiting for a sign from the universe, like here it is. So I went to a culinary program at 30 at night, and I wasn't that old, but I was the oldest one in my class. Everyone there was like 18, 19, kind of also trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their life. And I kind of was like, this is my last ditch effort at making this dream happen. So I came to professional cooking later in life.
Did that impact you mentally in any way? I've had friends who they like one friend specifically, he just got into medical school and he's 30, 31, and he's mentioned that he's surrounded by early 20-year-olds, and
Right.
that's kind of made him think of, oh, whether it's imposter syndrome or if he's kind of like, oh, he's, too late in life. Did you get anything like that when you started going to culinary school?
I did have that a little bit. One, I was married and, my husband and I were dual income. There was just a lot going on because I talked to my mom about it before I decided to do this because I didn't work when I was in the culinary program. I just did that and I stayed at home while my husband worked. And my mom was, she said, I didn't raise you to be, dependent on a man and you have to take care of your own stuff. And what if tomorrow he decides to, throw you out on your butt? So there was all that, even though I know that's not my relationship with my husband at all. I knew that wasn't the case, but just all of that in the back of my mind of, am I being unfair to my husband? Because now he has to bear the weight of the whole household. Am I chasing a dream that should just stay a dream? Am I good enough to do this? But then I also felt that because I went to it later in life, I knew this is exactly what I wanted to do. So I was in that class with these 18, 19-year-old kids who kind of were like, maybe I like this, maybe I don't like this. And I kind of was like, no, I have to make this happen. My husband's paying for this. I left my job. I have a degree like this. I have to make this happen or I don't know what I'm going to do. Or I feel like I'm going to be like making a big fool of myself to my friends and my family and all this stuff. And it was sad, not sad, but whatever. But I didn't really make a lot of friends in that class because like I went in like this, like I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't trying to be friends with anybody. I was just trying to absorb everything possible from that class because, it was my last ditch effort at making this happen. And they all kind of thought I was a little bit snobby, but it was more like, I didn't know how to explain to them, like, no, I'm just panicked and like, I need to make this happen.
Right, yeah, I can imagine, like, especially for you where you're like, the end goal. Like you're gonna do whatever you need to do to get there.
Right.
While the like 19, 20-year-olds are kind of like, oh, like they're exploring and figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's a good perspective to have because even for me, like my background's, I got my bachelor's in film.
Okay.
I'm not doing film right now, and I'm trying to get my master's in psychology. So like completely switched. But I've noticed with a good chunk of my peers too, where, you know, they went into college thinking one thing and now they're a few years out of graduating and they're doing completely something else.
Okay.
And the early 20s, late teens, it's a lot of changes are happening. And so I think there's a lot of pressure that we get put on where we feel like we need to have everything figured out by the time we graduate. And
Right.
then I hear from people in their 30s, they're saying like, "Oh, I made a switch." Or even some people in their 40s and 50s say like, "Oh, I did a career change and it was the best thing I could have done for myself." And so it's reassuring to hear like, okay, if it doesn't matter how far in life you are, if you make a switch, but it's what you want to do, there's no reason to like fight that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like you don't even have to commit to one switch. I did this now, and maybe when I'm 40 or when I'm 50, I'll be like, hey, I want to start a soap shop or something. I feel like life is about, reinventing yourself and just meeting yourself at every version of you and your passions at that moment.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So, okay, LA native and then moving to Paso, how was that like, especially as a Latina chef, where, Paso's not a very diverse community. And
Yeah.
so, like Nancy Ola, like I've had her on the podcast previously, and she shared a little about her experience of being a Latino winemaker and all that. So, how was like that for you as a chef?
It. So I kind of got a taste of this area because I went to Cal Poly. So I got a little taste of the lack of diversity when I was at college, and it really hit me hard then. That's when I really was, I grew up in LA where we're all different colors and we're all different cultures, and there's Ethiopian food and Mexican food and Chinese food. Like you can go wherever you want and experience whatever culture that you want. But I had never realized that there's other places in this world, in the US, that aren't like that. So when my mom told me when I was leaving, she's like, you're going to hit a culture shock when you get over there. I didn't really get it until I got here. And, I encountered some people who their only interaction with Hispanic people or Latin people were, the people who work on the farms. Like that was their only understanding or interaction with Hispanic people. So like to them, I was kind of like this weird, like unicorn, like they didn't know how to deal with me. And I had a lot of friends are friends who would say really dumb stuff, not because they were trying to be offensive, but they just really had no concept of that what they're saying is just so wrong. Like, so it's just so dumb. So I had a lot of that, but I came to love this area. I met my husband. My husband's from this area, and my husband's Peruvian, so he's Hispanic, and he had the same kind of understanding that I did of this area. And we tried to stay here after college, but there wasn't any work. So we went back to LA for 8 years, almost 10 years. But I always wanted to come back here because I love the vibe here, even though most of the people here, not most of the people, but a lot of people here don't interact with Hispanic people or Latin people a lot. A lot of them are, willing to want to learn about your culture and learn about you. And, they might make some missteps and say some dumb things, but they will, most of them will listen to like, hey, let's probably not say that anymore, or, I take myself as like a walking, like, let me educate you about, Latin culture and Latin people and like show you that we're all multifaceted and there's so much of us. And, I'm Mexican and Puerto Rican. Those are two different things, my husband's Peruvian. That's something completely different. So I reworked being here into being an ambassador for Latin people, trying to build a bridge with people who don't know that interaction, and also just make Latin food and Latin culture just more prominent in this area. As a chef, I do what pays the bills, and most of the time I do like Italian food or Spanish food or all this kind of different food. But I always tell people, my passion is Hispanic food. My passion is Peruvian food, Latin food. Like, if you let me make this for you, like, it's going to be amazing. Like, just trust me. So I always try to push that when I do food. Anywhere you see me cooking, eventually you'll see like Latin food on the menu there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mexican as well. And so where I grew up, there wasn't as many because I was grew up in like the suburbs of LA, but
Right.
more primarily like the Armenian, Anglo,
Right.
African American. So having to experience the dumb comments and just having to I don't even know how to say it, but I totally relate to the whole thing. Like, they're not coming from a bad place. It's just there's a
Correct.
level of like ignorance. They're just not educated and they don't know. And so I think it's a really good mentality that you have of like, oh, okay, well, now it's your opportunity to educate
Right.
because I think that's the first step.
Yeah. There's a moment where, you hear somebody say something dumb, and then you're like, am I going to blow up and get mad and be like, what the F are you talking about? Or am I going to take a moment, breathe, and be like, hey, that's not really, not right because of this and this and this, or that assumption is incorrect because of this and this and this. Like, let's take it as a teaching moment versus, shutting the door and then them feeling like, oh, I can't say anything to anybody,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just trying to bridge it. And, a lot of our friends have friends, people who I consider really, really good friends will just say dumb stuff sometimes. And it's just a teaching moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So with you, Pat, well, actually, I want to hear about Chopped and that whole experience. Like,
Yeah.
so how did that come about? And then what was your thought process as that was happening? Because that's really
Right.
cool.
Yeah. So it was a lot because when that happened, I had only really been cooking professionally for about 3 or 4 years. So it was just crazy. It was just crazy. And then it was kind of during COVID. I was working as an executive chef at a winery out here in Paso, which, just a side note, I became an executive chef after only being working professionally for three and a half years. So that was like incredible feat in itself. And I was like on this huge high of like, oh my God, I accomplished this. And then they reached out to me on Instagram. Chopped reached out to me on Instagram. And I was just like, my mind was blown. Like I couldn't believe it. And we did virtual, virtual interviews and all of that fun stuff. And then they picked me to be on the show. And then right before I left to go to the show, there was I was pushed to make a decision when I was where I was working at the winery, and I actually walked out because it's a huge long story, but I walked out. So I left that job, went to go film Chopped, and I was like, cool, I don't work anywhere. I'm not an executive chef anymore. And now I'm out here, like, I felt like a fraud, actually, you know? But I went and it still doesn't feel like it was a real experience. And, looking back at it now, the skill level that I had at that moment was great, but the skill level that I have now, like, are two different people. Like, I wish the version of me now would be on that show because the outcome would have been so much different.
Mm.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So now that you're more advanced in your career, what would be things you would have told yourself, your younger self back then, when it was you became executive chef, and then or you went to the Chopped, or even going into culinary school? Like, what are some things you would have told your younger self?
I mean, I don't know because there's really nothing I could have told myself, I could tell myself then from now that would have changed anything because I accelerated as fast as I think anybody could in that career. And I still continue to accelerate in such a fast rate. So I don't think there's anything I could say to myself other than, just keep at it, keep grinding, keep learning, keep teaching yourself, and it's going to pay off in the end. And, I'm still on this journey of where am I going to end up and what's going to happen. And I know that I'm nowhere near where uh, I where I plan to be. Like I don't know. I know that there's something big intended for me on this culinary program, and I know I'm nowhere near it. So I still feel like I'm in this like limbo of like what is meant for me, what is going to come from this.
Hmm. Does any of that kind of like what's next? Like, what does any of that bring? Like anxiety or any kind of feelings where you get stressed
Yeah.
out about it?
Oh man, it gives me so much anxiety. And my husband says it all the time. He's like, you get frustrated because you're like, okay, I figured this out. Now I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And I've had to tell myself like to stop and take a breather and appreciate your accomplishments in this moment. Stop looking to tomorrow of like, okay, I accomplished this. What's next? What's next? Like I've had to learn to just kind of enjoy this limbo of like, I don't know where I'm intended to go and just enjoy the little everyday accomplishments.
Yeah, kind of learning how to be more like in present, like in the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I struggle with that too, where I'll like, okay, reach the next goal. And
Right.
then you have the little high of like, okay, things are working out. And then I'm like, okay, what's next?
Right.
And I'm always like constantly trying to like, okay, how do I grow? How do I go to the next level? And I will end up realizing like, oh, the past month or the past year just feels like a blur because I wasn't really fully present to enjoy, or I'll accomplish something, but then I'll downplay it because I know there's something bigger to be accomplished. And so then I don't really appreciate or recognize what I had just accomplished.
Right. Yeah. I totally understand that. And it's hard because then you always Well, for myself, I feel like I always feel inadequate because I never take a moment to acknowledge what I've accomplished. So I always feel like, oh, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like last week you had 10 bookings and this week you have 0 bookings. So, you're falling off and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, or, this dish came out bad. So you're done. Like it's over. You're washed up, but when I pull out, I'm like, dude, I built a career out of nothing. At 31 years old, I started a business in LA that was successful and it shut down because of COVID. I moved back here. I restarted a whole new business, and again, it was successful. And I become kind of a prominent, not like huge name, but like people know who I am in this community. So I built a reputation again out of nothing. And I've done a lot for myself. And it's hard for me to remember that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just to have your name be recognized for the brand you created yourself, your business. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's helped a lot here being in this area because the community is smaller. In LA, you're swimming in a big pond with a bunch of people who have the same goals as you and the same stuff. It's hard to stand out no matter how talented you are. It's more about who you know and your connections and blah, blah, blah. Here, the community is small enough that if you really go out there and try to meet people and try to communicate with other people in your industry, as long as you're good at what you do and you are a genuine and nice person, you can make it a lot easier in terms of getting your name out there versus in a bigger place like LA.
Yeah, that's been one of the things I've really loved about Paso is there's like you said, the vibe, just there's something about the community up there. And depending if you're meeting the like-minded people, just the networking, people are really open to just like learning about you, wanting to talk to you to see a way to collaborate or partner. And it's always been one of the things I've really loved about that area, that
Yeah.
I could picture myself eventually moving up there. Cause
Right.
just especially like Tyler, the Women Making Waves group, and just everyone else I've met through that, just there's something that everyone's on the same wavelength almost.
Yeah. I think, although all of us are doing different things, I think we all have the same mindset of we want to, make SLO elevated and bring up the name of SLO and SLO County in general. So I think no matter what industry you're in, if that's your goal, then we're all kind of working together. Like if I'm successful as a chef here and, Tyler's successful as, an entrepreneur and this person's successful as this, we're all kind of working to build up the name of the community and through that also ourselves. So we like to help each other out. If I can, comp tickets to, Tyler or someone who runs like things to do and SLO kind of thing, I'll do that because, they'll help me out. They can come and have a good time. It's about, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and together we'll lift up the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are things that, speaking of kind of, your accomplishments that you've done, what are some things that you have accomplished that maybe going into the culinary program at like 30 that you would not have maybe whether believed or would have been shocked that it had happened so quickly? Yeah, I'm just
I mean,
curious to see.
all of it. I never worked, when you start in culinary school or culinary world, the path is you start as a dishwasher and you move your way up from there. I never worked as a dishwasher. I never worked as prep. I went straight onto the line. So I was cooking as my first job, which if you talk to anybody else who's a professional chef, they'll be flabbergasted because that's like almost unheard of. So that was amazing to me. And, the fact that I started a business, I hired a business coach when I was in LA who helped me just get all that stuff together. But I was working for very wealthy, high-end people in Beverly Hills and, Glendale, like people who I can't disclose anything about them, but like they were super up there. And it was just for me, just, putting it on Craigslist or putting it on Thumbtack and just hoping and praying that it would come out, and it did. And I mean, not hoping and praying, because I also did a lot of work.
Right.
I didn't just wake up and it happened. But, it's just, I also surprised myself because I never knew I had this much drive to make something happen. Because, when you're working in an office setting and you're on the paycheck, you're at your desk and you just have your tasks every day. It's kind of a safety zone, right? Because as long as you do your work, you get your paycheck and you go home and that's it. And like, I built something out of nothing. And I just never, I think me at 16, 17 or 18 would be just completely just in shock. I'm in shock now that I was able to do it. And every time when I left LA and moved out here, I rebuilt it. Every time I've left a job here or reconfigured my idea, or even with having my daughter, I've essentially rebuilt myself out of nothing every single time.
Mm-hmm. For people listening that, let's say they have their dream that they want to do, and there's the fear and anxiety of starting out of nothing, what would be some advice that you would give to them?
I think my biggest advice to people, because I get a lot of people who reach out to me like, oh, I want to do my business too, and I want to do this and that. And people have this idea that, there's some saying that you do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's absolutely 0% truth to that. Like, if you do what you love, you're going to be working constantly 24/7. Like, that is if you're not working, you're not generating income. So, my advice to people is like, is this something that you can see yourself doing 24/7, 7 days a week, grinding? Like, is this something that you're going to feel good about? Or is this something that you like as a hobby, that you like, I like making blankets. Okay, cool. But are you going to be making, 10 blankets a day for 7 days a week? Like, are you going to get burnt out on that? You have to really think about that, because I know so many people who kind of just jump in and then they're like, oh, this is so much work. Like, I didn't want to like, I enjoyed it, but now I hate it. So for me, when I talk to people, it's like, really make sure that this is something that you want to eat, breathe, sleep, wear, do all day long, every day. And then once you feel good about that, just do it. Jump out there, talk to people, go, turn on, I'm not a big, like, I'm kind of an introvert, but you have to have this persona of like, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is about me. What's the worst that anybody could say to you is, no, I'm not interested. And that's it. Just keep moving, keep hustling, and keep selling yourself, and you'll get where you need to go. You just have to grind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish that was something I had heard before I graduated college, because I had definitely like put all my eggs in the film basket.
Right.
And leading to my graduation, I had to produce a huge film. And so I busted my ass for like a whole year just on this one project.
Right.
And so it comes down to the premiere, and then immediately at the premiere, people ask me like, so when's the next one?
Right.
And so you don't get the chance to actually like
Right.
be present and appreciate your accomplishment. You're now like, oh, okay, like now I need to like create
Right.
something and produce for people. And I realized I felt very burnt out after that. And then, as much as I knew the film industry can be very cutthroat,
Right.
I didn't really think it was going to affect me as much as it did with like
Right.
certain like internships I had post college. I tried out and just did not enjoy the experience at all. It left me very feeling burnt out, and I had to
Right.
have that conversation with myself like, do I really want to be grinding to be in this environment forever? And I was
Right.
like, I don't think I could see myself doing that anymore, which kind of led me now to wanting to do the podcast and kind of going to
Right.
psychology route, or something I feel more fulfilled in. So that's something I wish I had that conversation, because
Right.
I felt like once I committed to doing my degree in film, I thought I had to commit or I would be a failure, and
Right.
changing my career or my goals would be a failure to other people too.
Right. It's hard. It's hard when, when you set an intention and then you're like, this is not what I wanted. you know?
You're like, wait, this is not what I expected. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for this.
Right. Yeah. And that's why, that's, why I felt so much pressure when I did this, because I told my husband, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm not going to work. You're going to pay the bills. And this is what I want to do. And I was like, in the back of my mind, like, shit, I really hope this is what I want to do because, it's gonna, I'm asking for a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I ask you this question, I had heard from a mentor of mine where her big thing was like find something that you love to do that is not connected to work. That
Mhm.
way you have it's she called it her, like her unicorn time, where it's like have a hobby that you love that isn't necessarily going to be connected to work. That way are ensuring there's a part of you that's not going to get that burnout
Right.
from something you love. So, is there been any time with you with culinary or cooking that you've kind of had a battle with burnout, or you haven't experienced that really?
I did before I was pregnant, like when we had first moved here, I was saying yes to everything because I was trying to get my name out there, and I was working at a winery, another winery, and if he was like, "Hey, can you stay late?" I was like, "Yeah." You need me to come early? Yeah. You need me to work, 10 days a week? Yeah, I'll do it. Just because I wanted to really get my name out there and really get my just people to know who I was. And, I was barely home, or, I'd get home at 11 when I had left at 6 in the morning. And I was barely seeing my husband. And we kind of have like a small farm out here, which was my idea. So I brought all these animals home, and then I was like, "Okay, peace, bye. You take care of them. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. Be a chef." So I was getting burnt out because I wasn't seeing my husband, and I wasn't seeing my house. Like we bought a house, I'm never in it. Wasn't seeing, my farm to table dreams that I was trying to do out here. And then I kept telling my husband, like, "Okay, it's gonna go down. It's gonna go down," and it kept not going down because I say yes to everybody. Like, "Oh, you need extra hands? Yeah, I'll do it. You need that? I'll be there." And then when I got pregnant, well, before I got pregnant, I really checked in with myself because I didn't think I was going to have children. I checked in with myself, like, I can't be doing this while I have a daughter. Like, I have to be home. I can't be grinding like this with a daughter. And I checked in with myself, like, are you going to be okay with that? Are you going to be okay with kind of not putting it aside, but shelving this for a little bit and focusing on being a parent? And when I realized that I was okay with that, that's when we decided to have kids. And I still worked a lot while I was pregnant, to the point where people were starting to get like really nervous about me because I was like giant and working in the kitchen. And then I took 3 months off when my daughter was born. And then I was really trying to kind of not do what I had been doing and saying yes to everything. And then there was like a month and a half where I was doing that same just crazy schedule. And I stopped and was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not seeing my daughter. I'm not seeing my husband. I'm not seeing my house. And I kind of hit this burnout of like, do I just stop and I just stay, be a stay at home mom for a while? Or like, how do I do this? So that's why I kind of switched around my work now. I took a set job. So I have a set schedule at a restaurant or like a food stand. They're a wine merchant that also has food. It's farm to table. So I have a set schedule with them, and then I'm with Lisa, and then I set a minimum. So when I do private events, I set a minimum of what I'll take. So if you can't meet that minimum, then it's not worth my time to be away from my daughter.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's still hard. Like I still am like, I want to do more. I want to be doing more, but I can't. Like I don't want to miss out on my daughter.
Right. And
Yeah,
I like that you said, it's not you're putting it to the side, it's just shelving it temporarily because you
right.
now you're enjoying this season of being a mom. And so
Yeah,
your career and your goals are always going to be there. It's just this little season where you just have to make a little few tweaks and adjustments.
right. And I mean, I don't want my daughter. I don't want to I work so hard and be like, "Oh, I'm doing it for my daughter," and then my daughter's 18 and she's like, "Cool, well, I didn't see you at all, but thank you." I rather have those moments with my daughter and show her, I prioritize you and you were the most important thing in my life.
Right. Yeah. Speaking from like a daughter's perspective, and even some of the friends I've had where, their parents were working all the time, they've shared with me that, it's a bittersweet thing because cool, their parents were able to provide a lot of really great things for them, but they weren't able to have those memories. And
Right.
with my dad and I always really now that I'm older, I recognize it. Where yeah, he had to sacrifice a lot of things because he always tried his best to make time for my brother and I.
Right.
And now that I'm older, like those are the things I'm going to remember. So
Right.
it's a hard situation. I would imagine. I don't have kids yet, but I would just imagine it's really hard because working pays the bills and provides opportunities, but then at what cost?
Right. And I mean, I know it's hard, and it's not shaming on anybody who has chosen the alternative the other way. It's just how it is in my household and how it is for me, and that's how I feel. And if anybody who's listening is on the other side, that's not anything against them. It's just
Mhm.
that's the decision that was made in my house.
Right. Yeah. It's just it's a tough situation altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I like that you mentioned too, just the checking in and just having the honest conversation with yourself of if would you be okay with this or would you not? And because I think it's hard when you're in the day-to-day grind to check in and
Right.
have an honest conversation like how are you doing really? And how okay would you be with whatever outcome you
Right.
choose?
Yeah. I mean, it was hard. I really felt like I was at a crossroads, and I felt like am I sacrificing myself? Am I sacrificing my identity? In order to be a mom, and I just had no concept of what it was like to be a parent. And now, obviously, I know what it's like to be a parent. Well, I'm learning what it's like to be a parent just 7 months in. But I realize now for me, it's not that I lost my identity. I'm just learning how to build an identity in a different way.
Mhm. Would there be any advice on that to other moms? I've had peers where, they're a recent mom and they kind of struggling with they've called it like an identity crisis because, pre giving birth to their child, they identify with either their hobbies or passion or their career, and then now they're mom and kind of having to learn how to balance that. Do you have any advice on that?
I mean, it's so hard. Being a parent and being a mom is such a hard, and it's such a unique experience. I feel like for everybody, I constantly get advice, unsolicited advice from people all the time. And it always comes from a good place. But, my, my experience with my daughter and my setup is completely different than somebody else's. So it's hard for me to tell somebody like, hey, yeah, just keep doing your hobbies, throw your
Mm-hmm.
kid in the mix, because I don't know their situation. I'm blessed that my husband works from home. We own our own home. My parents live nearby. We have friends and family that are nearby, and we have such a different support system that it's easy for me to go to work because my mom will watch my daughter a couple days of the week, or my husband's here and he works from home, so he's able to be with her. So our schedule and our dynamic is different than someone who maybe both the parents have to go to the office every single day, or they're a single parent home and they have to do everything. So it's hard to give someone advice on that. I think what I have done for myself is learning how to, like, when I do things with work or I do things, anything in general now, I'm kind of just like, how would my daughter perceive this? Like when I'm at work and stuff, like how would she take in, like, oh, my mom is working to build this brand, or my mom, turned down that job so that she can come home and stay with me. I mean, she's only 7 months old, but I try to put it in this dynamic. Like if she could understand what's going on, like how would she feel about these choices that I'm making?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how I've been trying to guide myself. I just want to be somebody that she can respect and understand.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good insight. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's being a parent it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime I've heard somebody say like, oh, like whether I don't know if exactly it's downplaying, not about anybody else, but the downplaying their situation of like, oh, how tough it is.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting to hear because you like it's yeah. I mean, again, I'm not a parent. I don't know, but from my friends that are parents or, just growing up seeing with my dad, like it is
Mm.
super hard. And so, kudos to you and kudos to all the parents out there that are doing it because like I know I couldn't do it right now. So
No, it's a lot. I mean, I had her at 33, which is kind of later in life for having a child. And, it's my mindset's a lot different than if I would have had her at 20 or at 25 or even at 28. I feel like I'm in the perfect mindset when I had her to do that. But what I realized, especially now with social media and all of this stuff, there's this like mom hate culture that kind of exists sometimes where, people judge other people on what they do. And it's like, oh, well, I would never do that. Why would you do that? And, people who post stuff on social media, like, oh, I got my kid a new backpack for school. And other people, like, what do you mean? Why would you get them a new backpack? They have an old backpack, blah, 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 blah. Like there's this just hating culture that sometimes happens when we should all just kind of be understanding and be like, hey, we're all just trying to make it work. We're all just trying to figure it out. And we should all just be sympathetic towards each other. And like, maybe I don't do iPads in front of my kid's face, but maybe you need to. Maybe your kid's hyper, maybe blah, blah, blah. But it's like, there's just this weird culture that I feel like sometimes people feel like they have to say like, oh, everything's great. We have it all figured out. She's perfect. I'm perfect. I'm not stressed out. Like no one can just sit down and be like, hey, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. And sometimes she annoys the crap out of me. And sometimes, I just want to go sit in the bathtub and cry. And that's totally fine.
yeah, because you're human,
Yeah.
you like to be perfect all the time. That
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And having a little person like my husband, she doesn't crawl on him, but on me, she's like hands in my mouth, pulling my glasses off my face. It's like sensory overload, and it's hard, and my husband's so sympathetic and appreciative. I appreciate him because I can tell him like, hey, I just need to go sit like alone. I don't want anybody to talk to me. I just want to be alone for like half an hour just to reset myself.
yeah, I've had heard a little bit about the mom hate culture, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize to the extent of it of like the kind of nitpicking all that. Because like, for someone that's still in their 20s, no kids yet, what I see a lot is the kind of the societal pressure, like, oh, you should start having kids, or
Right.
you should start settling down and find someone to get married with. That way you can start having kids. And
Right.
and for me, I'm like, it's tough because yeah, I want to do that, but I wouldn't want to just force it just
Right.
because that's the timeline that is supposed to be correct, even though there's no timeline.
No, there is no timeline. And I feel like, my mom always used to tell me having a child is a beautiful experience, but it's unfortunately, it's nothing for most people, it's nothing special. Most people can have a child, whether you want to or not, or you're trying or not, anybody can have a child barring any, issues. So the beautiful thing about having a child is having a child when you're ready and you want one. And it's my mom would say, the final puzzle piece of this bigger picture that you have. And for my husband and I, we weren't sure we were going to have kids. We got to this point where we're like, okay, well, we bought a house. We've done all this traveling. We're kind of settled. We're in a community with our friends and our family. And we're kind of like, I think this is it. Like we're missing this hole, which is a child.
Mm-hmm.
But if we would have done it for us, if we would have done it when we were in LA, when we were living in an apartment, when we were like, still partying and hanging out, like it just would have not worked out the right way. And I don't feel like I would have been as patient or as calm or as, as understanding as I am right now as a parent if I would have rushed this earlier. So I always tell people, it's when it's the right time, it's the most beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I've heard too. You know when it's the right time. It's kind of the same thing when I've heard, whether you want to get married to a person, like when you know. And so if you're trying to force or trying to fit that puzzle piece into the wrong spot, the picture's not going to be correct.
Yeah. And I mean, other people will tell you, get married now. have kids now. People were telling us we were together for 12 years before we had a baby. Like, you guys, you're married. You should have kids. You have a house. You should have kids. And it's like, cool. Are you going to come take care of my child? Are you going to pay for their diapers? Are you going to pay for this and that? Like, it's easy to tell other people how to live their life, but unless you're planning on being in there with them, it's really not your place to say anything to anybody about how they run their life.
Right.
And I think that's why, like, when you asked me earlier, my advice, like, I don't know, because everyone's situation is different. And, if kids are on your path or not on your path, but even when you do have kids, the mom culture, the little mom hate culture, but, the same people who told you to have a kid will also be the same people who be like, oh, but not like that, but don't raise them like that. Don't do this and don't do that, So it's you're never going to make everybody happy. So at the end, it's just make yourself happy and do what you think is right for yourself.
Yeah, I've heard from one of my friends, he's married, and they have kids and everything. And I've heard from the wife of kind of little snippets of that where, she would feel whether it was anxiety or just like a lot of pressure, because I feel like you kind of have to put a face on, especially on social media, where you're performing for everybody to be this perfect mom and have this perfect family, perfect job, whatever. And I think that's where just the whole comparison thing on social media gets really twisted, because guarantee almost everybody on social media, whatever life you're seeing there is like not accurate. It's you're seeing a little snippet.
Good time as they're saying they're having.
Yeah. Like, if you looked at my social media, like, oh, look, I'm doing this and that. And I'm like, well, okay, on the day to day, I might be tired. I may be exhausted. There might have been a month where I was just so really sad, like depressed, but I'm not going to obviously show that on there. But it's just the whole comparison thing. You kind of just need to like reel it back in and just have a reality check of like, okay, why am I going to comparing myself to something that's a facade?
Exactly. It's all fake. People always tell me and my husband, like, oh, you guys have the perfect marriage and you guys are the perfect match and you guys have everything figured out. And it's like, I love that we give that appearance, but you don't see, how hard we work at being married, and you don't see how hard we work at, we fight, and how hard we work at fixing those fights and doing all this stuff. Like, I'm not going to post that on social media. Like, me and Ruben had this huge fight today, like, you're going to see us hanging out and going to the vineyards and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you're going to see us 2 hours after the fight, but everyone always just makes these assumptions based off the pictures that you see. And there's so much in between those pictures and behind the scenes of that,
And I think this goes to like, for people, the mom hate culture, where like there's a lot more to the mom than just what you're wanting to nitpick.
Right.
And so it's just like not putting women or just anybody in general, like not putting these people in a little box that you think that they need to fit into your perspective of whatever that is, whether it's like you're trying to live vicariously through somebody else. And so you want them to do the perfect thing that you wanted to do, or.
And I mean, I catch myself doing it too. And I have to tell myself not to do that. Like, I see friends who, they buy everything new for their kids. Everything is like brand new out of the box, blah, blah, blah. And, in my mom hate culture, it's like, why would you do that? They're just going to spit up on it and they're just going to break it, blah, blah, blah. You should just be like me. And then I have to stop myself and be like, you don't know their situation, and you don't need to know their situation, and they don't need to explain themselves to you. Mm-hmm. This is the goal that I have done. I do hand-me-downs. I do, gifts for people, because my daughter just wrecks things, and I feel good. I feel better about it knowing that it's hand-me-down. If she spits up on it and destroys it, I don't feel too bad about it. But again, this is my household. And, when I catch myself doing that to other people, I have to say again, that's not my house. That's not my life. And, you don't owe an explanation to anybody about how you live yourself or how you run your household.
Right. Yeah, no, this is all things like really interesting and insightful, especially for someone that's not there yet. Because this is just really good things to keep in mind. And it kind of goes back to the whole thing of like people that say stupid stuff because they're not aware.
Right.
And so for myself, I'm like learning, like, okay, these are things I'll just be better at being intentional of remembering if I ever think of like, oh, why are they doing this? Or, whenever I have kids, like, oh, like if people are wanting to tell me something, Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
No, I mean, it's hard, and it's something that I've tried to, I grew up with critical people, and that's something that I've tried to slowly kind of breed out of myself of, again, like, it's not your place to criticize other people. Just focus on yourself. Stop looking at other people's bowls, look at what you have and focus on that. And that's it. And,
Mhm.
I hope that I have it more out of me by the time my daughter starts recording things, because I don't want my daughter to be critical of other people. I don't want my daughter to be concerned about how other people are living their lives. Because I feel like it's so draining also when you're sitting there and being like, how come they're doing this and how come they're doing that? And you should just be focused on you.
Yeah, you're just feeding that negative energy
Yeah,
instead of just feeding into things that are productive and healthy.
exactly. And then I criticize people, and then I turn around. I'm like, can you believe that they're criticizing? These people are criticizing me. So it's like you gotta walk the walk and talk the talk. You have to be what you say you are, and treat other people the way that you want to be treated in that sense. So and I mean, it's not anything I have. I can't say I figured it all out. I'm not critical of anybody. Like every day, I have to work on that with myself.
Yeah. And again, that's part of being human where,
Right.
we're such observing creatures that, we're analyzing everything, especially on social media where you're just being fed all this information constantly. I think it's just really, it's so much easier just to, "Ooh, okay, let me have an opinion." Because you're
Yeah.
just only seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah. It's like you don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people that are listening that, happen to be in Paso and want to book an event with you or anything, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So I actually have two websites. I have my website, which is chefcandice.com, just Candice. Or on Instagram, I also started a supper club, a Latin inspired supper club here. I'm doing my second one coming up on the 31st. So it's the last Wednesday of every month. So you can do private events with me as Chef Candice, or if you just want to like know what my food is about and more of my passion, I do a supper club event the last Wednesday of every month, and they're limited seating, so 8 to 10 seats, very intimate, and it's first come first serve. I don't charge too much on it because I just really want to kind of just showcase my food to people and just have people come together. So yeah, those are two ways: private chef or through Club Step Step.
Cool. Yeah. And then I'll be sure to put the links in the bio. That way, whatever platform people are listening on, you can go check out her Instagram and her websites. So
Okay.
anything else you'd want to share? Any last minute remarks?
I mean, you know, I'm so grateful to you for including me on this. This you and your stuff. How our journeys have kind of crossed right now. It's a beautiful thing. You're trying to build something, and I'm trying to build something. So it's nice to connect with other people uh, doing that grind and trying to make their stuff happen. So it's inspiring to talk to you, and hopefully other people have this type of engagement or experience as well. It's validating for me to interact with you, and it helps me feel good that I'm on the right path on my journey. So
Oh, thank you so much. No, likewise. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I know you're busy as a mom and your career, so I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also just as like a fellow Latina, like I see you like now you're growing business and everything. And so I'm bummed because I'll be in Paso, but the second through the fourth. So I will have just missed your
Mhm.
Wednesday event, but I want to definitely come up for those at some point.
Awesome. Well, yeah. We do open, if we have open seats. We do 8 to 10 seats at Kindred Oak for brunch too. So if we have open seats, we do open it up to the public. So if you're ever in town on the weekend and you want to come just do a brunch at Kindred, I'm
Oh,
usually like, yeah, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
okay. I'll have to look for that weekend then. I'll see,
Oh,
maybe.
cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Candice. I really enjoyed learning some things from you. This was definitely insightful for me. And then it was just great just getting to finally meet you, kind of
Yeah.
over Zoom. So hopefully I'll be able to meet you at some point in person.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks guys for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one.